Hello, this is Angelia, and you're listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And we were talking about reforms in America. Back in the day, mental health treatments were pretty brutal, almost medieval, and some people decided, hey, maybe we need to work on the mind more than do this physical torture to help these people out, So we're going to take back up on that. We were talking about Dix's earlier, and so Dix's work was followed by that of Clifford Beers, a graduate of Yale University who suffered a breakdown and was hospitalized as a result. So, he knew firsthand. He had to go in there himself. In 1908, he published his now famous book, A Mind That Found Itself, and I'm sure you can Google that and find a copy if you want, which recounted his breakdown and the horrible treatment he received in 3 typical institutions of the period. So, he was in 3 different institutions and suffered different things that went on there. Beers graphically portrayed the inhumanity of physical restraints, especially straitjackets, which were used to control excited patients. And now, when I worked at a nursing home back in the 80s, they were still using physical restraints to keep some of these people who were falling in their chairs because they would get up and try to walk because they had dementia or Alzheimer's, and they would fall. There's now a more nice way to do that. But anyway, that was something that was being used. And I know back in the 70s, I heard stories of straitjackets still being used then. So in my lifetime, that was something that was still happening. He fully recovered after a compassionate and friendly hospital attendant took him home and treated him with affectionate care. So clearly someone said, this guy don't need all that. He's pretty cool except for maybe 1 or 2 problems. With this book, Beers began his lifelong efforts to humanize the management of the disturbed and to educate the American people about the problems that are posed by the mentally ill regarding themselves and the entire society. And that's still a problem here in the good old USA. People are ignorant of what mental illness is. There's still a big stigma. So he did a good thing, and more people need to keep that information going so that people know. His work led to the formulation of what is today the National Association for Mental Health, which continues to struggle for the same goals. And we also have NAMI, which I'm a member of the National Association for Mentally Ill. So it's trying to help remove the stigma of a mental illness, because anyone from any walk of life can have a mental illness, and it shouldn't be a stigma. Moral therapy. A common feature to all these humanitarian reforms was kindness to the patient. Because that's what people who have mental problems need. They need some kindness. They don't need people being mean to them and, stuff like that. They need to be understood and treated kindly. Seeking to gain the confidence of the patients and instill in them a sense of hope, Pinnell and his followers developed what has since become known as moral therapy. This involved creating a totally therapeutic environment, social, psychological, and physical. Because, when you treat mind, spirit, body, then you're treating the person as a whole. It's a holistic, way of treatment, and he's the guy who started that. Moral therapy assumed that the problem was psychological, and therefore that it could be cured through understanding, patience, kindness, and proper care directed to the patient's psychological state. So, they were the first ones to pretty much put forth what is happening nowadays in therapy. Each patient had an individualized treatment program based on personal needs. And that's something, if you go to therapy, that's what your therapist is going to do. There's no, well, I've met some therapists who are not so good, but I'm just going to say, good therapists, that is what they do. They create an individualized treatment program for you based on you, not have a rote outline that works for everybody, because we all know that's not true. Another feature of this new approach was that the patient actively participated in the treatment process. So, they were reasoning with folks, talking to folks, and letting them be involved in their treatments. Especially important in moral therapy was placing the patients in a new and different environment, so that patterns associated with their past history could be broken. This last idea came from some new theories in psychology that stress the influence of the environment on emotional and mental states. And any of us who've been in a bad environment know that that definitely affects you. The beneficial aspects. Samuel Woodward, an American physician and the first president of what is now the American Psychiatric Association, was one of the people interested in the effects of environment. Although he believed that mental disturbances were the symptoms of a somatic disease, he felt that human beings were governed by unchangeable natural laws that provided a guide to proper living. So, he might have been off a little bit on that, right way to do everything, and everything should be the right way, because, again, not one way works for everybody. So, what you consider to be proper living, let's see, alright, sorry about that. That was my husband, so I wanted to make sure I picked that up, because I wasn't sure. It wasn't anything important, so I'd already taken care of it, so. Alright, back to what I was saying. If these laws were followed, both a healthy mind and a healthy body resulted. If not, neither the body nor the mind could function normally. Therefore, he felt that psychopathology, although organically caused, could have psychological elements as well. So he was kind of backtracking a little bit, but every little bit has led to where we are now. So, according to this view, insanity was at least partially self-inflicted. Now, I'm going to disagree with that, of course. Most people are not mentally ill because they have self-inflicted it. There are people who have made bad choices, and that can be considered self-infliction, but, mostly not. By ignoring the straight and narrow road of the natural laws governing health, people place themselves instead on the road to mental illness. Now, there can be something said if you're genetically predisposed to a certain thing, and you're not getting nutrients that, help your body to help overcome that, or if you're engaging in addictive behaviors, when you have a predisposition to addiction, that can certainly cause some problems in your life. Woodward named intemperance, ill health, masturbation, religiosity, personal disappointments, and even the routine pressures of the business and commercial world to be unnatural and the leading causes of insanity. So, his views were a little bit Elizabethan, a little bit stricter. Today, we would say intemperance is a personality trait. That's something that you can work on. Ill health, of course, take care of yourself, go to your doctor. Masturbation, I don't think that causes mental illness. Now, addictive behaviors like porn addictions and things like that can lead to some problems in your life, especially if you allow that to escalate. And, if you make the choice to be a sexual predator, that's definitely going to have a problem for you and other people. So, that's something you can watch out for. Religiosity. There are people who have some problems with this, that their religious teaching doesn't really gel with their world. And so there can be some cognizant dissonance there, but religiosity in and of itself is not going to make you crazy. Personal disappointments, certainly we become depressed when we are disappointed. So he was onto something there. And the pressures of business and commercial world, I've often said those are unnatural. We are diurnal animals. Yes, we are animals. We're not vegetables or minerals. And we are made to awaken when the sun comes up. That sun hitting us in the eye is supposed to wake us up. So getting up at 5, 6, sometimes even 7 in the morning is not a natural thing. And then at night, we start getting tired. They've shown evidences that, even in caveman days, when night started, so, they were sitting by the fire telling stories and, things like that, looking at the stars. So they enjoyed at least an hour of night. So, I've kind of made my own little rhythm where I go to bed at 11, get up at 8 in the morning when the sun pops up. And, that's probably what, along the same lines he was thinking. It's like, we've made this big man-made world, but it's not the natural world. And sometimes people forget that, and they get too involved in the man-made world and forget there is a natural world. And there's a section of society here that thinks, screw the natural world. We were made to overcome and be in charge of the natural world. But, okay, but if you use everything up in the natural world, then you don't have a natural world anymore. And you can't live. Your planet will die. So there's got to be some common sense in being a steward. The guy said steward, meaning you take care of things. So that was his opinion. That's the leading cause of insanity. By removing these elements, he believed that both the symptoms and the disease itself would disappear. And the sooner it happened, the better the person's chances for recovery. So, is how it is. We're a little, like I say, a little stricter, a little Elizabethan there. A little Victorian, we'll go, because it was the early, century, but still, close enough in that era that it's still, kind of a late 1800s mindset. Removing the person to a place where moral therapy could be provided clearly enhanced this probability. The development in Massachusetts of the Worcester State Mental Hospital under Woodward's leadership provided exactly such a setting. There, in the days of Woodward's charges, the patients were provided with a substantial but simple diet, kind and respectful staff members, and the freedom to use the hospital grounds and even to go into the city without supervision. So he was like super trusting and, good to these people. Woodward apparently established close personal relationships with nearly every patient, all of whom came from a background similar to his, middle to upper class, educated, Protestant, New England born and bred. So, there wasn't a wide cross-section of humanity in society in this institution. So, there are some problems with saying this worked. So, Woodward's treatment program, clearly based on his own notions of etiology, was both integrated and cohesive. How successful was moral therapy? According to Grobe, Woodward's own research reported that over 50% of the initial admissions to the hospital were discharged as recovered. That's quite a number. 50% in mental health, that's a big number. An independent follow-up study found that 58% of those who were discharged never had a relapse. These findings are very impressive when compared with today's figures, but they're even more incredible when we realize that the discharge group included a great many chronic, that is long-term, cases. We must conclude that the family atmosphere of the small hospital with its humanistic care and hopeful attitude, produced a therapeutic environment that had lasting and beneficial effects to its patients. So, you know, again, I often tell people who want to go into leadership, because I did some workshops on that, you draw more flies with honey than you do vinegar. And, if you have to be the boss to be the boss, then you've kind of lost your bossness, if you want to put it that way. Like I said, when I had people, I let them do what they want to do. I didn't micromanage them. It's like, oh, you want to do this? Okay, you do this. But then I expected them to do it. If you told me you were going to do something, I expect you to do something. So, Enlightened 19th century therapies. So, we've gotten to more enlightened ways of treating mental illness. The 19th century saw several unusual methods of dealing with mental disorder. Many of them, excuse me, holdovers from ancient times. Both bloodletting and sudden shocks from either cold water or electric current, Galen had used live eels, were among the treatments still widely used. So, there were hospitals that decided that, hey, this might work, we're going to still keep doing it. But some new techniques were gaining popularity. Because masturbation was long believed to lead to insanity, extreme measures were sometimes taken to discourage the practice. One method utilized a male chastity belt, which consisted of a metal plate attached to a leather waist belt. The penis was inserted through an opening in the plate, at the rim of which was a sharp prong that issued a sharp jab if the wearer had an erection. This method was, however, a good deal milder than the operations that desensitized or removed the sex organs of stubborn cases. So back in the day, if you were, acting out sexually in the mental institution, that you might just get castrated. So, that can be a problem. Quite an opposite approach was taken by James Graham, who billed himself as James Graham, OWL, which stood for Oh, Wonderful Love. His treatment for all problems consisted of having the person or persons spend the night in the magnetico-electrico bed he had built on a highly ornamented, domed temple. The bed was 12 feet by 9 and rested on 40 glass pillars. Blue lights shone overhead, while music and incense wafted up from below. Graham asserted that sleeping in his celestial bed would cure any physical or mental problem. In addition, any children conceived during this therapy would live gloriously trouble-free lives. So, again, there have always been people who are gonna try and scam you. There's charlatans, and you need to be wise as serpents but gentle as doves. The therapy that drew the most attention, however, was phrenology, the determination of personality and intelligence by examining the shape of the skull. And there's people in different parts of the world who still think this is got something to it. But they've determined that the shape of your skull has to do a lot more with your DNA than your personality map. So Viennese physicians Franz Joseph Gall originated this theory after noticing that his most brilliant students had bulging eyes. He then examined many hundreds of skulls, those of prisoners and patients in insane asylums, as well as those of his most gifted colleagues. Can anyone else say ew? From these studies, he derived a map of the areas of the brain that supposedly affected mental and emotional faculties. And like I say, if your parents were smart, chances are you're going to be smart. If they weren't, not so much, then probably you're not so much. So again, coincidence. A typical diagnosis was that a woman with a hysterical pregnancy had been overstimulated in the region that controlled love for children. Vienna found Gall's ideas too unorthodox, and he was forced to leave. But one of his students, John Caspar Spurzheim, was given a tumultuous welcome in the United States. And like I said, the U.S. is always running a little behind Europe. It takes us a while to get knowledge across the pond. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff. I'm sure you've seen a movie that talks about, the health spa at the time. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was in the 1800s, and they were doing all kinds of crazy contraptions and foods and things, and these poor people, they weren't poor, they were rich people buying this cure. They would go to these places and pay for this cure. And like I said, there was a lot of folks working with not a lot of knowledge, but they were making some money off, getting people to pay for these things that they were doing. So that's where I'm going to leave here for today. I hope that this helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. And that's what this is, an educational program. It's not designed to treat any mental illness. If anything I said, triggered you or is a problem in your life, then by all means contact your mental health professional. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. The link to that are in my posts. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for today. Until next time.